This is Jewish Spotlight, a weekly television program presented by Chabad Lubavitch of Long Island, featuring various aspects of modern Jewish life and Jewish culture. Now, here is your host, Rabbi Tuvia Teldin.
Shalom. We're going to talk about a very personal and very interesting topic, a topic that could be very controversial in Judaism, and something that I'm sure you're going to get something out of, because the issue of the relationship between the Jewish man and the Jewish woman is a tough issue. It's an important issue. And it's an important issue because that's what makes Judaism click, and that's what makes the shul click. That's what happens in the synagogue, what happens in a home. And making sure that relationship is well understood as to the differences in that relationship. I'm not talking about marriage counseling or therapy. I'm talking about how does Judaism define the different roles in the synagogue and sometimes in the home as well between the man and the woman. And for many people that might be a controversial statement, just that there are different roles, that there are any differences at all. But as you may be aware, Judaism does say that men and women complement each other. They're equal, but they have different roles and different natural God-given talents to be able to develop in this world. We have someone with us today who's really a very, very interesting rabbi who's done a lot of research on this topic. And I know you're going to see two guys up here with a beard talking about Jewish women. Where are the Jewish women and where are they expressing their opinion? But I think you're going to find what he has to say to be very insightful and very much of a proponent of Jewish women. So without further ado, let's introduce Rabbi Ari Raskin, rabbi of B'nai Avraham, a wonderful synagogue in Brooklyn Heights, Brooklyn. Rabbi Raskin, it's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you, but I have to thank my wife for allowing me to come here tonight.
I'll do the same. I'll thank my wife as well.
I tell the famous story that in heaven there are two lines for men.
Yes.
One line is the line that the woman was the head of the household, and the other line is the line that the man was more dominant in the house. And the line that the woman was in control was full of men. It was packed. And the line that the man was in control had one guy standing on it. And this guy was Yankel. And Yankel's friend is standing on the line and says, Yankel, what are you doing there? I know you. I know your wife. Your wife treated you like a shmata. And she always told you what to do. And why are you standing on this line? You belong here with us. He says, what should I tell you? My wife told me to stand here. So I'm here tonight. My wife told me to come.
Okay, and she told you what to say also? Or
you bet.
Okay. You know, the fact is, it's unfortunate that so many people have such misconceptions of what exactly is the role of a man and the role of a woman. I'd like to say the role of a man and a woman also, because I react to this saying the role of the Jewish woman as if the man doesn't have a role also. We both have roles. It's a matter of understanding how they complement each other.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because in the Torah we find two commandments. One commandment is a man shall not wear the garments of a woman, and another commandment that says a woman shall not wear the garments of a man.
Right.
And because of the fact that Torah gives two independent commandments, teaches us that they are totally equal, man and woman. Because if man, for some reason, was better than the woman, then technically we should say a woman shouldn't wear the garments of a man. But a man can wear the garments of a woman.
Right.
Or the reverse. But the fact that the Torah gives equal
each equally as far
responsibility
as
for man and the woman
now,
tells us that they both have the same
That brings up a question which I can hear already going through the minds of some of the people in our audience who are a little knowledgeable about Judaism, that we do say that there are more mitzvahs given to the men than there are given to the women, that men are obligated to more mitzvahs. For instance, the wearing of the tefillin, or the wearing of the tzitzit, or other things that we do during the course of the year that are time-bound, men do, and some of them the women don't do. So can you explain why that would be if God, in fact, is treating both equally and is looking with love and with affection towards both male and female?
There are basically two answers to this. Number one is that the idea of a mitzvah is to condition the person. Each commandment, there are 613 commandments in the Torah, each one conditions a different part of the body. We believe that by nature, men need...
Conditions the body or the soul, or what do you mean by conditions?
The soul enters into the body.
Yes.
And it goes into the different limbs and different organs and veins, etc., etc. And the job of the soul is to refine the body and to elevate the body to a new level.
So it's almost like a light switch. Every single mitzvah turns on a certain part of the soul or the body.
That's correct.
Or the soul-body connection.
Each time we do a specific mitzvah with a specific organ or limb of our body, that limb or that organ becomes elevated and
Gotcha. Okay.
somewhat refined.
Go on.
By nature, men need more conditioning, a more refining than women.
You could say that.
And more than that, women were given a certain responsibility, which is the responsibility of giving life, and therefore they emulate God, because that's the greatest gift in the world, to be able to give life, and man does not have that ability, no matter how much we want to be able to do that. Only women were endowed with that responsibility and that great opportunity to bring forth life.
Sure,
and because
gift.
of that, God said, you are exempt. You know, I'm a rabbi, and therefore as a rabbi, there's a certain thing which is called parsonage. Parsonage means we're exempt from paying taxes on certain amounts of money for certain things that we do, being that we are a rabbi. Now, I never saw a rabbi who says, government, IRS, I don't want the exemption. You know, I want to pay the taxes. You got to be crazy. You know, for a woman to say, I want these mitzvahs, even though I'm exempt, is like saying you want to pay taxes. Rather than understanding your role and the reason why you were giving the exemption, they are forgetting about that responsibility and totally shifting to the other side. It's interesting that the Torah, even though both are equal, when you say two people are equal, it means that they have different greatnesses or different qualities that the other one does not possess.
Right, they complement each other.
So the Torah says that the woman has a greater affinity to spirituality than the man. To give you a few examples, the Code of Jewish Law states that the Jewish soul enters into the body at the circumcision, which means to say a young boy is born, and for 8 days he does not have a Jewish soul. When does that soul enter into the body? At the Brit, at the circumcision on the 8th day. So now I ask you, Rabbi, when does the woman get her Jewish soul?
At birth.
So the answer is at birth. And the Talmud says women are born circumcised. There are certain religions that mutilate women, and they think they have to circumcise women. The Torah says not only are women exempt from circumcision, but actually they have this quality of circumcision, and they are born with it. And this also implies that at the moment of birth, they already have the godly soul. So they are in tune with spirituality 8 days earlier than the man.
And in a certain way have a more special connection. I heard another very interesting explanation as well, that God is not playing favorites between men and women. God is giving each one of us what we need in order to be able to have a relationship with God, in order to connect to God. Man, by definition, needs more in order to be able, as you said, to refine himself or to fix himself. So therefore, God gave extra mitzvahs to the man on top of what he gave to the man and the woman.
Well, he's
itself.
8 days late. He needs some more mitzvahs to make up.
He's got to catch up. So in other words, God is just giving the man the opportunity for our needs to be able to do what has to be done. Because our mitzvahs are specifically those mitzvahs that have to do with time.
That's correct. It's interesting that in the synagogue that men have to pray 3 times a day. And that's the obligation that we have. And there are specific time zones. And women are exempt from any mitzvah that has a specific time zone. And therefore, they're not obligated to pray 3 times a day.
Right.
But it's interesting that the Torah, in many areas, talks about the greatness of women. For example, when it came to the giving of the Torah itself, which is the blueprint of the entire universe, and which makes us the chosen people, God tells Moses, first talk to the Jewish women, then talk to the Jewish men. And the question is why? Why first talk to the women, then the men? And the answer is God, in his infinite wisdom, knew that if the women will not accept the Torah, then no matter how much the men try, they will not succeed. They need the women to back it and to be the foundation of Torah.
Now, Rabbi Ruskin, you touch a little bit on the synagogue itself. I want to go back to that if you don't mind, because that's an area where there's also a lot of controversy, and a lot of women feel put off or feel somehow that they're not given full equal rating in the synagogue in an Orthodox setting. Now, I just want to precede this conversation also by pointing out something I explained to many people who have this question. That is that in Judaism, throughout thousands and thousands of years, 95% of Judaism has always been in the home, and 5% has been in the synagogue. The synagogue has always had somewhat of a secondary role, because the real Jewish life is where you eat, where you sleep, where you drink, where you live, where you do your homework, where you do your schmooze, and so forth and so on. Synagogue is a place you go in order to be able to fulfill your religious obligations.
It's a men's club. It's a men's club.
Okay, it could be that way. And for many women, that's something, especially in our society, where in many places, in many communities, it's 95% of Judaism is in the synagogue and 5% is in the home. So the roles have been reversed to a certain degree, and as a result, women feel, wait a second, this is where Judaism is, and I am to be in any way or form somewhat excluded. And that's what happens when we reverse those 95 percentiles.
So, unfortunately, as you mentioned, Rabbi, really Judaism is 7 days a week, 24 hours a day.
Exactly.
And unfortunately, for some women or some men, Judaism now is only 2 hours a week, Saturday morning, or an hour a week when they'll come to hear the shofar blowing on Rosh Hashanah. So therefore, if you do go to synagogue or participate in Judaism only 1 hour a week, you could have that negative approach to Judaism. But if you look at it as a general level of 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, which primarily is in the home, then we all know
and the woman
who runs the home.
No
question about it. My wife always tells me, make sure you take out the garbage. I say, yes, dear. Those are two most important words for a positive, good marriage. Yes,
okay.
Dear, you'll be okay.
Okay, we're not talking about marriage counseling.
Okay, that's the next show.
Okay. Now, getting back to the synagogue, one of the things, of course, that people are a little bit taken aback by, men and women alike, but of course more women than men, is the mechitza, is the separation between the men and the women. That in an Orthodox traditional synagogue setting, that there is separate seating, not only separate seating, but also somewhat of a partition between the men and women. Can you explain that to a woman who wants to know, why should I go to a place to pray where there's going to be that separation? I can't sit with my husband, I can't sit with my
grandfather, Rabbi Jacob Jehecht, of blessed memory, would always say, when my wife is sitting next to me, I can't focus on the prayers.
Okay.
But I have a bit of a twist to this whole concept.
Which is the way it should be to a certain degree.
No question about it. No question about it. We hope so. And that's why this leads me to the next step of the point of a mechitza. It's, there's an interesting law in the Code of Jewish Law that says when man is having intimacy with his wife, he should not think about another woman. And reading this law, I was shocked. I say, what is it saying here? It's implying that when you're not having intimacy, that you are allowed to think about another woman. And doing more research, I found that the answer is that this law was stated at a time when polygamy was allowed. Mm-hmm. In other words, Jacob, our forefather, had two wives. He had Rachel and Leah. So the Torah is telling us that even though you have more than one wife, when you are having intimacy with Rachel, you must be there not only physically, but also emotionally and mentally. Do not think about Leah, which is your other wife. Now, when you're not having intimacy, it's fine. And when you are with Leah, do not think about Rachel. You are to be there body and soul. Now, our rabbis tell us that the word tefillah, which is prayer, on a mystical level, really comes from the word Naftali Elikim Naftalti, which means union and connection, intimacy. So what prayer really is intimacy between man and God. Mm-hmm. So can you imagine, you're sitting in the temple, and you have intimacy with God, and God says, by the way, Yankel, who's that woman next to you? If you're having intimacy with me, then how can you think about somebody else? Mm-hmm. And the same is true for the woman. When she is praying, if she has her husband sitting next to her, God says, excuse me, if you're having intimacy with me, then why are you thinking about another man? And therefore you need the mechitza to separate the sexes.
Someone just once explained to me, which falls in line with what you're saying also, that going to synagogue is not necessarily a family experience. Family experiences can be many other types of things, but this is yeah, exactly. But this is a vertical experience. It's not a horizontal experience. In other words, we're there to connect to God. And like I say, if you're having a true connection, then why would you want to put yourself in a situation where there are very easy distractions? Now we get to another point, which is when like you said, the men's club, when all the men are on one side and they're talking to each other, that's also not right.
That's a problem. And therefore, if it was up to me, I would put a divider between each man and make the synagogue like box seats. However, you have a problem, it would be a fire hazard.
Rabbi Raskin, maybe you should try that out for a week. You'll see what kind of reception you get.
But perhaps this is one of the reasons why traditionally men take the talit and they put it over their heads
to use that as
much more a separation, to focus on the relationship between man and God.
Very good. Quite possible. Interesting. Now, How about in the synagogue as far as the number of a minyan? We have a minyan which is 10 men specifically and doesn't include women. And women feel very excluded from that. Why can't they be counted?
Let me take it a step further, actually. You know, I once asked the question, I can understand why you need a mechitza to separate the men and the women. So let's have a mechitza, let's have that separation, but count the women too. Have 5 men on one side,
Right.
5 women on the other side,
Okay.
and pray.
All right.
Women are people too.
Of course.
On the contrary, they're, as we said earlier, even on perhaps a higher spiritual level than men. But it's important to know the historic reason behind the minyan, where it comes from. One approach is that when the Jews sinned by the golden calf, the Torah tells us that only the men participated. They gave of their jewelry, but the women did not participate. And because of that, later, the men had to atone for that sin.
Right.
So when God builds the temple, he tells the men, I want you on a yearly basis to give $50, and only men, not women, to atone for the sin of the golden calf. And that $50 we will use to purchase a sacrifice, which will be brought to the altar twice a day, once in the morning and a second time in the evening.
Right.
And that will be the atonement for the sin of the golden calf. Because only the men participated in building the golden calf, not the women, therefore only the men have to give of their money to buy this daily sacrifice.
Fine, I got you.
Now the temple was destroyed, there's no sacrifices. What do? The Talmud tells us that prayer, the minyan, takes the place of sacrifices. So just like the sacrifice was a communal offering, now by 10 men getting together, they are taking the place of that communal sacrifice. And that serves as an atonement for the entire Jewish people.
So in other words, the reason why men have to be the basis of the minyan is because one of the roles, one of the important purposes of prayer as a congregation, not as an individual. Individual, incidentally, it's important to point out that any individual has the mitzvah to pray and stop and talk to God any time of day, anywhere.
No question about it. Man and woman
child
must pray every day to God, and you have to ask God for your needs.
Just to pour your heart out, whatever it might be. But in terms of the type of prayer we're talking about, rabbinical prayer, the prayer in the synagogue, the idea is that it's an aspect of atonement, and men working together as a group are the ones that really have to ask for atonement as a group.
That's
because
correct.
Women, you don't hear of women ganging together and becoming, doing terrible things. It's men usually get together as a congregation
men gangs,
and do
all
things,
the gangs
right,
are
and
the
do
men.
things like interesting. So it's a different dimension, different perspective on why the minyan is specifically for men for that purpose of atonement. Another question. We're talking about something very interesting that the Talmud says concerning women. Bina yisura nitna b'isha yosem b'ish. That women were given an extra measure of understanding. Can you explain that to our audience? It's a clear statement as far as the superiority of women in that area.
It says women were given bina yisera, a greater level of understanding or intuition than men. That's a clear statement in the Talmud. And yet, whenever I get attacked by women about the role of the Jewish woman, they will always quote to me another statement in the Talmud that says, Nashim daiton kalos, that the knowledge of women are weak. So first of all, I point out, hold on a second. Let's call spade a spade. It's true that it says that statement, but yet it also says a greater dimension of intuition were given to women. Now what we fail to understand here is that there are actually 3 levels to intellect. There is the concept, there is understanding that concept, and then there's the application of that concept. So when it comes to a concept and idea, usually, according to the Talmud, the man has the idea. And then the woman takes the idea and elaborates on it. We find this biologically. The man emits the seminal drop, which has the potential for a child. The woman takes that seminal drop for 9 months, and she will elaborate and expound on it. So
you're saying that that physical prototype is really a model also for intellectual development as well. The woman has that ability, not only in the womb, but also intellectually to expand to a much greater degree than a man does.
No question. They have a way of articulating and explaining concepts in a way that no men can really convey. And that's why by nature you find that women are better school teachers, and especially preschool teachers, than men. Men lack the patience and lack the ability to really explain themselves and to convey the message in a clear, lucid light. So women have that bina yisera. According to Kabbalah, by the way, it says also in the Talmud that women have 9 parts of speech, and men were given 1/10 of speech. And the Kabbalah connects the understanding with the speech together.
Interesting.
That because they have this greater level of understanding, therefore they have 9 levels of speech compared to 1. Mm-hmm. Now, how do we understand the Talmud that says, Nashim daitan kalos, that the knowledge of women are weak? So, as I said earlier, das is mistakenly misunderstood to be knowledge. It's not knowledge. Das means application. Once you have an idea, and then you expound it upon the idea, now you have to apply it. For women, it's easy to apply. The word kala can mean easy. In other words, a rabbi gives a Torah class and says, you know, it's important to have a kosher house. And that means you should have 2 sets of dishes and a 3rd set for Passover. The woman comes home after the class. She heard it. She expounded on it. And now she's excited about it and she wants to apply it. She starts pulling out all the dishes, throws out all the old dishes. And the husband comes home and says, what are you doing? Well, the rabbi spoke about kosher. So he spoke about it. Doesn't mean you have to change your whole house around. Now the husband goes to the same class and hears about, you know, the importance of eating kosher, and he walks home and the wife says, what did you learn today? Well, the kosher. So what are you going to do about it? Well, it was a nice thought. I'll think about it for a while. So the idea of noshim daitan kalos is really a positive.
The application of the knowledge for a woman is easy.
It's easy than for a man.
Interesting. Very, very interesting. I like that. Okay, I'll have to tell my wife about that. I think she'll like that very much also.
I think she'll agree with you on that one.
Very good. Now, in terms of other things concerning women, we have the relationship between men and women in the house. Let's talk about that. We're jumping from the synagogue, going to the house, the role of the woman, the role of the man. Can you give us a little bit of insight as far as how Judaism talks about the complement? Because we know we have the male and the female attribute of God. We know we have during the week. We have the male aspect of the week. We have the female aspect of the week. So what is the... what's the bottom line here?
The Talmud tells us that any man that has no woman, that has no wife, is not called Adam, is not called a man. Furthermore, it says that God created Adam, and he created male and female. In other words, Adam, the first being that God created, was a hermaphrodite. It was a male and a female back to back.
According to the Zohar.
According to the Zohar, according to Kabbalah, even according to the Talmud. Man and woman were one body.
Right, so it wasn't as if woman was taken from the rib of Adam.
No.
That's
the idea of the word sela, which most people translate to mean a rib, is really a mistake. It means a side.
Right.
An entire side of man became the woman. And so when the Torah says God created Adam, Adam is only one that has both qualities, the masculine and the feminine. And we believe, according to Kabbalah, every male must have within him the female quality, and every female must have a male quality.
To be complete.
To be complete. Now, what is the meaning a man has no woman, he's not an Adam? It's the same concept. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to be married. Some men, unfortunately, are not married. They couldn't find the right woman. But it means to say that even a man that is masculine by nature, which is dominant and powerful and strong, must also possess the female qualities, which is to be sensitive, to be merciful, to be kind, etc., etc. So really, both of us have to complement each other, but yet at the same time we have to complement ourselves. In other words, we must access that feminine quality as well. And in the home, primarily, the woman has the female quality, but there are many times that the woman has to be strong.
Right. When
the husband's not home at night and the kids don't want to go to bed, the wife has to be able to scream and say, go to bed right now, or else. So these are the masculine qualities, which really, again, for us to be a complete human being, to have a perfect balance, we must possess both of these qualities.
Interesting. Now, Rabbi Raskin, I know that you go around, you write about this subject, you've given classes and series of classes about this and lectures. What kind of reaction do you get from women who come and they hear you speak about these subjects?
I have to tell you that many feminists have eaten at my Shabbos table and come to these lectures on women's issues, and they walk out totally stymied. I mean, they say, well, I have to think about it. I can't answer you right now, but I got to do more research. And it totally blows them away. So I think it's important that we discuss these issues and we bring it out into the open. When I first came to my synagogue 14 years ago, and the first Shabbos I was there, I was attacked emotionally by the women in the temple. Rabbi, how come you have a mechitza? How come women don't get called to the Torah? How come this and that? I told my president, I said, I think we should start a series on women's issues. And my president said, no, you're opening a Pandora's box. Just sweep it under the carpet. They'll forget about it. Well, 14 years later, I'm sorry, I told my president, they haven't forgot about it. Finally, he agrees with me. It took me 14 years to convince him. And he gave me his blessings. And we began doing all these series and classes on
very
women's
much
issues.
Appreciate it.
And they love it.
No,
and they're so happy.
It's definitely important to talk about these things because these are issues that hit many people, men and women alike, at the real core of their being. And they want to know what are the answers to these questions. What is the Jewish attitude? How is it that Judaism is being equally minded in their treatment?
I think there's one more point that I want to convey to all the women out there. And that is that women were endowed with a very special